When Michael Jordan walked into Chicago's fanciest restaurant that night, he just wanted to celebrate his friend's promotion. Instead, he got turned away because of his skin color. "We're full," lied the manager, Henri, even though empty tables sat everywhere. "Try the sports bar down the street." Michael's friends were angry, but Michael stayed calm. He whispered something in Henri's ear that made the man's face go white with fear. Then he walked out. A young server saw everything and quit her job that same night. What seemed like simple discrimination was about to become the biggest story in America. What did Michael whisper that terrified Henri? And why would those few words change the restaurant business forever? The golden light from the crystal chandeliers made everything in Le Chateau Noir look like it was covered in honey. Michael Jordan pulled his black Mercedes up to the front of Chicago's most expensive restaurant. Tonight was special. His best friend Marcus had just become the head doctor at Children's Hospital. They were going to celebrate. "Look at this place," said Yvette, Michael's wife, as she fixed her pearl earrings in the car mirror. "It's so fancy I'm afraid to touch anything." Michael laughed and squeezed her hand. "Don't worry, we belong anywhere we want to be." In the back seat, Marcus Chen was telling his wife Diana about his first day as the new boss. "The kids in the cancer ward made me a card," he said, his eyes bright with joy. It said, "Best doctor ever" in crayon. I'm going to frame it. Diana smiled at her husband. She was a teacher and loved hearing about Marcus helping sick children. "Those kids are lucky to have you," she said. The four friends had known each other since college. Back then, Michael was just a skinny kid who spent every free minute playing basketball. Marcus studied medicine while working 2 jobs. Their wives had been roommates who dreamed of changing the world. Now, 20 years later, they still met once a month to share stories and stay close. Michael handed his car keys to the young man who parked cars. The kid's eyes went wide when he saw who it was. "Mr. Jordan, wow, I watch all your old games on YouTube," the teenager said, his voice full of excitement. "What's your name?" Michael asked with a warm smile. "Tommy, sir. I'm saving money for college." Michael reached into his wallet and pulled out $200. "Keep working hard, Tommy. Education is the best investment you can make." Tommy's hands shook as he took the money. "Thank you, Mr. Jordan. Thank you so much." The friends walked toward the restaurant's heavy wooden doors. Le Chateau Noir was known for serving only the richest. People in Chicago? Movie stars ate here. Politicians made deals at these tables. Business owners came here to show off their success. Inside, the restaurant looked like a palace. Red velvet chairs sat around tables covered with white cloth. Silver forks and knives shined under the fancy lights. Waiters in black suits moved quietly between tables, carrying expensive wine and perfect food. At the front desk stood Henri Beaumont, the head waiter who decided who could eat at the restaurant. Henri was a thin man with gray hair slicked back with gel. He wore a black suit that probably cost more than most people made in a month. His nose was always pointed up in the air, like he smelled something bad. Henri had worked at Le Chateau Noir for 15 years. He was proud that only the right kind of people ate at his restaurant. Tonight was the restaurant's 25th birthday party. Henri wanted everything to be perfect. Other guests were already eating. At one table, a white family in expensive clothes laughed loudly over champagne. At another table, 2 businessmen in suits talked about buying and selling companies. Everyone looked rich. Everyone looked like they belonged. Henri saw Michael's group walking toward him. His eyes narrowed. He knew exactly who Michael Jordan was. Everyone in Chicago knew the basketball legend, but something dark moved across Henry's face. Something mean and ugly. "Good evening," Michael said politely when they reached the front desk. "We have a reservation under Jordan for 8 o'clock. Henry looked at his reservation book. but he wasn't really reading it. He already knew what he was going to say. "I'm terribly sorry," Henri said, but his voice didn't sound sorry at all. "We're completely booked tonight." Marcus looked confused. "But we called 3 days ago. We confirmed this morning." Henri shrugged. "I don't see your name anywhere. Perhaps you would be more comfortable at the sports bar down the street. They have chicken wings and big screen TVs. More your style, I think." The restaurant was clearly half empty. At least 10 tables sat waiting for guests. Other people eating dinner turned to stare. Some pulled out their phones to record what was happening. Yvette's face went red with anger. Her hand tightened on Michael's arm. She wanted to yell at Henri, to demand they get their table. But Michael stayed calm. Diana whispered to Marcus, "This is wrong. This is so wrong." Marcus stepped forward, his doctor training making him want to fix problems. "Sir, there's obviously been a mistake. We can show you the confirmation email on our phone." "No mistake," Henri said coldly. "We simply don't have room for your party tonight." In the corner of the restaurant, a young server named Isabella Rodriguez watched everything happen. Isabella was 22 years old and had worked at Le Chateau Noir for 2 years. She had dark hair pulled back in a tight bun and kind brown eyes that missed nothing. Isabella's face burned with shame. She knew Henri was lying. She had seen him do this before to other families who didn't look like his usual customers. It made her sick to her stomach every time. Isabella lived in a small apartment with her grandmother, Elena. She worked at the restaurant to pay for her grandmother's medicine and her own business school classes at night. She dreamed of opening her own restaurant someday, where everyone would be welcome. Michael looked around the half-empty restaurant. He saw the staring faces. He saw Isabella in the corner, her eyes full of sadness for what her workplace was doing. He saw Henri's cold smile, waiting for them to get angry or make a scene. But Michael Jordan had learned something important during his basketball career. Sometimes the best response to disrespect wasn't anger. Sometimes it was something much more powerful. "I understand," Michael said quietly, his voice steady and strong. Then he leaned close to Henri Beaumont and whispered something in his ear. "Whatever," Michael said, made Henri's face go white as paper. The mean smile disappeared. Henri's hands started to shake. Michael stepped back and looked Henri in the eyes one more time. Then he turned to his friends. "Come on," Michael said. "Let's go somewhere that knows how to treat people right." As they walked toward the door, other customers whispered to each other. What had the famous basketball player said? Why did the proud head waiter suddenly look so scared? Isabella watched them leave and made a decision that would change her life forever. She untied her apron, threw it on the front desk, and walked out the door behind them. Henri Beaumont stood alone at his reservation desk, still shaking from whatever Michael Jordan had whispered in his ear. Around him, the Golden Restaurant suddenly felt cold and empty. Outside, Michael's group walked to their car in silence. But something had started that night, something that would grow bigger than any of them could imagine. The question hung in the air like smoke. What had Michael Jordan said that made the powerful Henri Beaumont look so terrified? And why had a young server just quit her job to follow them into the night? Isabella Rodriguez caught up with Michael's group just as they reached the parking lot. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. "Mr. Jordan!" she called out, still holding her restaurant apron in her shaking hands. Michael turned around, surprised to see the young server who had been watching from inside the restaurant. "I'm sorry," Isabella said, trying to catch her breath. "I'm so sorry for what happened in there. That was wrong. That was so wrong." Yvette stepped closer to the young woman. She could see the pain in Isabella's eyes. "What's your name, honey?" "Isabella Rodriguez. I worked at Le Chateau Noir. I just quit." Isabella's voice was small but determined. I couldn't stand there and watch that happen anymore. Marcus looked back at the restaurant, then at Isabella. How long has this been going on? Too long, Isabella said, her voice getting stronger. Henri does this all the time. Black families, Latino families, Asian families. He always finds excuses. No tables available. Dress code violations. Computer problems with reservations. I've seen it happen dozens of times. Diana put her hand on Isabella's shoulder. You did the right thing by leaving. Michael studied Isabella's face. He saw something that reminded him of himself when he was young. Hunger, determination, a refusal to accept injustice. Isabella, Michael said gently. What will you do now? Don't you need that job? Isabella's eyes filled with tears, but she held them back. I'll figure something out. I always do. I just couldn't stay in that place one more minute. As they talked, Michael's mind drifted back to another time, another place, when he was much younger. He remembered being 8 years old in Wilmington, North Carolina. His mother, Dolores, had taken him to a fancy restaurant for his birthday. She had saved money for weeks to afford the special dinner. But when they got to the restaurant, the hostess looked at them with cold eyes. I'm sorry, the woman had said, but we're looking for someone different for that table. Young Michael didn't understand what was happening, but he watched his mother's face change. He saw her shoulders drop. He saw her pride break into pieces. Outside that restaurant, his mother had knelt down in the parking lot and cried. It was the first time Michael had ever seen tears on his mother's face. Baby, she had said, wiping her eyes. Some people judge others by what they see on the outside. They don't look at what's inside a person's heart. But you're going to change the world by showing them what's inside. Michael shook his head, bringing himself back to the present. Isabella was still standing there, waiting for an answer about her future. Where do you live? Michael asked. With my grandmother Elena. She's sick and I take care of her. I work at the restaurant to pay for her medicine and my business school classes at night. Michael's heart ached. This young woman was carrying so much responsibility on her shoulders. What kind of business do you want to start? Yvette asked. Isabella's face lit up for the first time that evening. A restaurant. But not like Le Chateau Noir. A place where families can come together. Where kids can celebrate birthdays and grandparents can share stories. Where everyone feels welcome. Marcus smiled. That sounds like a beautiful dream. It's more than a dream, Isabella said firmly. I've been planning it for 3 years. I've saved almost $10,000. I have business plans, menu ideas, everything. I just need more money and the right location. Michael remembered another painful moment from his past. He was 15, trying out for his high school basketball team. Coach Jim Tucker had looked at him like he was wasting everyone's time. Son, the coach had said, you're just not good enough. Maybe you should focus on more realistic goals. Not everyone can be a basketball player. That night, Michael had gone to the outdoor court near his house. He practiced alone under the streetlight until the sun came up. Every missed shot made him more determined. Every harsh word from the coach became fuel for his fire. Michael looked at Isabella and saw that same fire burning in her eyes. Isabella, he said, I want to help you. But first, I need to ask you something. Are you willing to work harder than you've ever worked before? Yes, sir, Isabella said without hesitation. Are you willing to face people who will tell you that you're too young, too inexperienced, not good enough? I face that every day already, Isabella replied. Michael smiled. This young woman had the heart of a champion. Then here's what we're going to do, Michael said. Meet me at my office tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. We're going to talk about your restaurant dream, and we're going to talk about making some changes in this city. Isabella's eyes went wide. Really? You would do that for me? I'm not doing it for you, Michael said. I'm doing it with you. There's a difference. As they prepared to leave, Marcus asked the question that had been bothering him all night. Michael, what did you whisper to that man, Henry? He looked like he had seen a ghost. Michael was quiet for a long moment. His friends waited patiently for his answer. I told him something my mother taught me when I was 8 years old, Michael finally said. I told him that his words had power, and that power could either build people up or tear them down. I told him that someday, someone would remember how he made them feel tonight. That's it? Diana asked. Michael shook his head. No, I also told him that I would remember too, and that I had the power to make sure everyone else remembered as well. Yvette took her husband's hand. She knew that look in his eyes. It was the same look he had during basketball games when someone tried to tell him he couldn't win. What are you planning, Michael? She asked softly. Michael looked back at Le Chateau Noir, where Henri Beaumont was probably still shaking, behind his reservation desk. I'm planning to show this city what real hospitality looks like, Michael said. I'm planning to turn rejection into opportunity, and I'm planning to make sure that no family ever has to feel what we felt tonight. Isabella felt hope rising in her chest for the first time in months. Maybe losing her job wasn't the end of her dreams. Maybe it was just the beginning. As they got into their cars, none of them knew that Henri Beaumont was watching from the restaurant window. He was making phone calls, trying to figure out how to fight back against Michael Jordan. But Henri had no idea what he was up against. He had challenged not just a basketball legend, but a man who had spent his whole life turning obstacles into stepping stones. The real game was just beginning. Isabella drove her old Honda Civic through the quiet streets of Chicago. Her hands were still shaking from everything that had happened. She had just quit her job. She had just met Michael Jordan. And tomorrow, she was going to his office to talk about her dreams. Her small apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building that had seen better days. The paint was peeling, and the stairs creaked with every step. But it was home. It was where she lived, with the most important person in her life. Abuela Elena, Isabella called as she opened the door. I'm home. Elena Rodriguez was sitting in her favorite chair, wrapped in a colorful blanket that she had made herself many years ago. At 75 years old, Elena's hands were wrinkled and her hair was silver, but her eyes were still bright and full of love. Mija, Elena said, using the Spanish word for my daughter. You're home early. Did something happen at work? Isabella sat down on the small couch next to her grandmother's chair. She took Elena's warm hands in hers. Abuela, I need to tell you about tonight. Something big happened. Isabella told her, grandmother, everything. About Michael Jordan and his friends coming to the restaurant. About Henri Beaumont turning them away because of the color of their skin. About watching it happen and feeling sick inside. About quitting her job and following them to the parking lot. Elena listened quietly, nodding her head. She had heard stories like this before. Too many stories like this. Mija, Elena said when Isabella finished talking, I came to this country from Mexico 50 years ago. I was your age then. I've seen this hatred my whole life. In restaurants, in stores, in schools. People looking at me like I don't belong. Elena's voice was soft but strong. But you know what I learned? The people who hate, they always lose in the end. Hate makes people weak. Love makes people strong. Isabella felt tears in her eyes. But Abuela, I lost my job. How will I pay for your medicine? How will I pay for school? Elena smiled and touched Isabella's face gently. God closes one door and opens another. You did the right thing tonight. You stood up for what's right. Good things will come from this." Meanwhile, across the city, Michael Jordan couldn't sleep. He walked through his big house, looking at photos from his basketball career, pictures of championships, awards, and celebrations. But tonight, none of it felt like enough. The disrespect at the restaurant had awakened something deep inside him. All the times people had tried to make him feel small. All the times he had to prove he belonged. All the times he had to work twice as hard just to get half the respect. Yvette found him in his study at 2 a.m. He was sitting at his desk, writing notes on a yellow pad. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, sitting down in the chair across from him. "About second chances," Michael said, not looking up from his writing. "About how some people get them and others don't. About how that needs to change." "What are you planning, Michael?" Michael finally looked up at his wife, the woman who had been by his side through everything. "I'm planning to make sure what happened tonight never happens to another family." "How?" "By showing this city what real opportunity looks like, by giving people like Isabella the chance they deserve." At 6 a.m, Isabella woke up to find an envelope that had been slipped under her apartment door. Inside was a cashier's check for $50,000, the exact amount she needed to pay for all of her grandmother's medical treatments for the next 2 years. There was no name on the envelope, just a small note written in neat handwriting. "For those who stand up for what's right." Isabella's hands shook as she stared at the check. $50,000. More money than she had ever seen in her life. "Abuela!" she called, running to Elena's room. "Look at this!" Elena looked at the check and smiled. "I told you, mija. Good things come to those who do right." "But who could have done this? Who even knows where we live?" Elena's eyes twinkled with wisdom. "Does it matter? Someone saw your heart last night. Someone wants to help." At the same time, the Chateau Noir was having the worst morning in its 25-year history. Henri Beaumont arrived at work to find 3 official cars parked outside his restaurant. The health department was inside, checking every corner of the kitchen. The fire marshal was looking at all the safety equipment. The labor board was reviewing employment records. "What's going on here?" Henri demanded. "Inspector Martinez from..." The health department looked up from his clipboard. "Routine inspection, sir. We received some complaints." "What kind of complaints?" "Food safety violations, worker safety issues, discrimination in hiring practices." Henri's face turned red. "This is ridiculous. We've never had problems before." "That's interesting," Inspector Martinez said, "because we have records of 15 complaints filed over the past 2 years. Somehow they all got lost in our system, but we found them yesterday." By noon, Le Chateau Noir had received 12 health code violations, 4 fire safety warnings, and a notice that their employment practices were under investigation. Henri's phone rang all day. Customers calling to cancel reservations, staff members calling to quit, food suppliers asking when their bills would be paid. The restaurant that had been booked solid for months was suddenly empty. Henri knew this wasn't a coincidence. Someone was systematically destroying his business. Someone with power and connections. He picked up his phone and called Frank Castellano, a private investigator who specialized in finding dirt on rich and famous people. "Frank, I need you to dig up everything you can on Michael Jordan. I don't care what it costs. I need something I can use against him. Jordan's pretty clean," Frank said. "I've looked into him before for other clients." "Everyone has secrets," Henri said angrily. "Find them." Meanwhile, Michael was in his office, making phone calls to some of the most powerful people in Chicago. Business leaders, community organizers, restaurant owners who believed in fairness. "I'm not asking for revenge," Michael told each person he called. I'm asking for accountability. And I'm asking for your help to create something better. One by one, they agreed to meet with him. One by one, they promised to support whatever plan he was developing. At 3 o'clock, Isabella arrived at Michael's office building. She had never been in a place so fancy. The lobby had marble floors and crystal lights. The elevator moved so smoothly she could barely feel it going up. Michael's office was on the 20th floor, with windows that looked out over the whole city. Isabella could see Le Chateau Noir in the distance, looking small and unimportant from up here. "Isabella," Michael said, standing up from his desk. "Thank you for coming." "Mr. Jordan," Isabella said nervously, "I need to ask you something. Did someone send me money this morning?" Michael smiled but didn't answer directly. Sometimes good things happen to good people. Don't question it. Just accept it. Isabella felt her heart pounding. "I don't know how to thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Michael said. "Thank me when we change this city together." He pulled out a folder filled with papers and spread them across his desk. "Isabella, I want to ask you something. What if your restaurant dream could be bigger than just one place? What if we could create something that would help hundreds of young people like you?" Isabella looked at the papers. They were business plans, architectural drawings, and financial projections for something called the Jordan Community Culinary Institute. "What is this?" she whispered. "This," Michael said, "is how we turn last night's rejection into tomorrow's opportunity." Outside, dark clouds were gathering over Chicago. Henri Beaumont was about to discover that he had challenged more than just a basketball legend. He had challenged a man who knew how to turn every obstacle into a stepping stone. And Frank Castellano was about to start digging into Michael Jordan's past, looking for secrets that could destroy a reputation built over decades. The game was getting more dangerous. But Michael Jordan had never backed down from a challenge in his life. He wasn't about to start now. Isabella stared at the papers spread across Michael's desk. The architectural drawings showed a beautiful building with big windows and modern kitchens. The business plans talked about teaching young people how to cook and run restaurants. The financial projections showed millions of dollars being invested in the project. "This is incredible," Isabella whispered, running her fingers over the drawings. "But Mr. Jordan, this must cost so much money. How is this possible?" Michael sat down across from her. "Isabella, for the past 10 years, I've been building something quietly. It's not about basketball or fame. It's about connections. Real connections between people who believe in giving others a chance." He pulled out his phone and showed her a list of contacts: business leaders, community organizers, restaurant owners, teachers, doctors, and everyday people who wanted to make a difference. "Every person on this list has a story," Michael explained. Dr. Sarah Kim was turned away from medical school 3 times because people said women couldn't be surgeons. Now she runs the biggest children's hospital in the state. Isabella nodded, listening carefully. Chef Roberto Martinez started with nothing. He worked in restaurant kitchens for 20 years, before someone gave him a chance to open his own place. Now he owns 15 restaurants and employs over 200 people. Michael scrolled through more names. Teacher Maria Santos. Business owner David Chen. Community leader Reverend James Williams. All of them remember what it felt like to be told they didn't belong. All of them want to help others who face the same challenges. "And they'll all help with this institute?" Isabella asked. "They're already helping," Michael said with a smile. "Dr. Kim is donating medical services for our students. Chef Martinez will teach advanced cooking classes. Teacher Santos will handle the business education program." Isabella felt overwhelmed. "But why me? I'm just a server who quit her job. I don't have experience running something this big." Michael leaned forward. "Isabella, last night you made a choice. you could have stayed quiet and kept your job. Instead, you stood up for what was right, even when it cost you everything. That tells me more about your character than any resume ever could." Across town, Dr. Margaret Washington was sitting in her law office when her phone rang. Dr. Washington was Chicago's most respected civil rights attorney. For 30 years, she had been fighting discrimination cases and winning. "Dr. Washington," Michael's voice came through the phone, "I need your help with something important." "Michael Jordan calling me directly," Dr. Washington said with a laugh. "This must be serious." "It is. Can you meet me this afternoon? I want to talk about accountability and change." Dr. Washington had heard about what happened at Le Chateau Noir. Word traveled fast in Chicago's professional community. "I'll be there at 4 o'clock. When Dr. Washington arrived at Michael's office, she found Isabella still there, surrounded by papers and looking both excited and nervous. "Dr. Washington," Michael said, standing up to greet her, "I'd like you to meet Isabella Rodriguez. She's going to help us change how this city thinks about hospitality and opportunity." Dr. Washington shook Isabella's hand firmly. "I've been documenting discrimination cases for decades, waiting for the right moment to make a bigger statement. Maybe that moment is now." "What do you mean?" Isabella asked. Dr. Washington opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. "I have records of discrimination complaints against restaurants, hotels, and businesses all over Chicago. Most of them never go anywhere because people are afraid to speak up or they don't have the resources to fight." She spread the papers across Michael's desk. "But Henri Beaumont's Le Chateau Noir appears in these records more than any other establishment. 15 formal complaints in 2 years, all mysteriously lost or ignored by city officials." Michael studied the documents. Who filed these complaints? Families celebrating graduations, business people trying to have important meetings, couples on anniversary dinners. All of them turned away for reasons that had nothing to do with availability or dress codes. Isabella's hands clenched into fists. "I saw some of these incidents happen. I watched Henri turn away good people for no reason except the color of their skin." "The question is," Dr. Washington said, "what do we do about it now?" Michael walked to his window and looked out at the city. "We build something better. We create opportunities for people like Isabella to succeed. And we make sure that discrimination has consequences." Dr. Washington nodded. "I can file a class action lawsuit against Le Chateau Noir with Isabella's inside knowledge and my documentation. We have a strong case." "No," Michael said, turning back to them. "A lawsuit will take years and only punish one restaurant. I want to do something that will create lasting change." Meanwhile, at Le Chateau Noir, Henri Beaumont was having the worst day of his business career. His phone rang constantly with more bad news. "Mr. Beaumont," his food supplier said over the phone, "we're going to need payment for your outstanding balance before we can make any more deliveries." "How much do I owe?" Henry asked, though he was afraid to hear the answer. $43,000, sir. Payment is now 60 days overdue." Henry hung up the phone and put his head in his hands. 3 more staff members had quit that morning. The health department had ordered him to replace all his refrigeration equipment. And somehow, word was spreading through Chicago's social media that Le Chateau Noir was a place to avoid. His phone rang again. This time it was Frank Castellano, the private investigator. "Henri, I've been digging into Michael Jordan's background like you asked. Please tell me you found something I can use." "Well, there are some old stories about his gambling during his playing days, some arguments with teammates, a few incidents where people called him arrogant." Henri felt a spark of hope. "That's perfect. We can use that to make people question his character." "Hold on," Frank said. "I also found something else. Stories about Jordan that never made the news, quiet acts of kindness. anonymous donations. Times he helped people without anyone knowing about it. Frank paused. Henri, I've investigated a lot of famous people. Most of them have secrets they want to hide. But Jordan, the more I dig, the better he looks. Henri's hope turned to despair. Even his private investigator was taking Michael's side. Back at Michael's office, Isabella was reading through business plans and asking smart questions about budgets and timelines. How many students would the institute serve each year? She asked. We're planning to start with 50 students in the first class, Michael explained. Young people aged 16 to 25 who want to learn culinary arts and restaurant management. And they would all get jobs afterward? Better than jobs, Dr. Washington said. They would get opportunities to start their own businesses. Michael is planning to provide startup loans and mentorship for graduates who want to open their own restaurants. Isabella felt tears in her eyes. This is everything I dreamed about, but bigger than I ever imagined. Michael smiled. Isabella, I have a proposition for you. I want you to be the Institute's first director. Isabella's mouth dropped open. Me? Direct the whole program? You understand what it's like to work in restaurants. You know what discrimination looks like. You care about treating people fairly, and you have the courage to stand up for what's right. But I don't have a business degree yet. You'll finish your degree while you're working, Dr. Washington said. Michael's foundation will pay for your education. Isabella looked around the room at these successful people who believed in her. People who saw potential where she only saw problems. There's just one thing, Isabella said quietly. What about my grandmother? I can't leave her alone. Michael and Dr. Washington exchanged a look. Isabella, Michael said gently, your grandmother's medical bills are already taken care of, and the Institute will have on-site housing for staff who need it. Elena can live there with you. Isabella started crying, not sad tears, but tears of joy and relief and hope. Why are you doing all this for me? She asked. Because, Michael said, 10 years from now, when you're running successful restaurants and training other young people, you'll do the same thing for someone else. That's how change really happens. One person helping another, one opportunity leading to the next. Outside, the sun was setting over Chicago. Henri Beaumont was alone in his empty restaurant, wondering how everything had gone wrong so quickly. But he had no idea that the real challenge was just beginning. Michael Jordan wasn't just planning to compete with Le Chateau Noir. He was planning to make places like it unnecessary. 2 weeks had passed since that terrible night at Le Chateau Noir. Frank Castellano sat in his small office, staring at his computer screen. He had spent 14 days digging through Michael Jordan's past, looking for anything that would help Henri Beaumont fight back. What he found wasn't what Henri wanted to hear. Frank picked up his phone and called Henri. "I've got my report ready," he said. "Finally," Henri said, sounding desperate. "What did you find? Gambling debts? Angry business partners? Something I can use?" "Well," Frank said slowly, "there are some old stories about Jordan's gambling. During his basketball career, some heated arguments with teammates, times when people called him arrogant or demanding." Henri felt hope rising in his chest. "That's perfect. People need to know that their hero isn't perfect." "But Henri," Frank continued, "I also found hundreds of stories that never made the news. Stories about Jordan helping people quietly, without any cameras or reporters around." Frank opened his files and began reading. In 1998, he secretly paid for the funeral of a janitor's son who died in a car accident. In 2003, he bought groceries for 50 families during Christmas, without telling anyone. In 2010, he paid the college tuition for 12 kids whose parents lost their jobs. Henri's hope began to fade. "Those are just publicity stunts." "No, they're not," Frank said firmly. These people had no idea who was helping them until years later. Jordan made them promise never to tell the media. He didn't want credit. He just wanted to help. Frank kept reading. Last year, he spent his birthday visiting kids in the cancer ward at Children's Hospital. This year, he's been quietly funding a scholarship program for single mothers going back to school. "Why are you telling me this?" Henry asked angrily. "Because you asked me to find the truth about Michael Jordan. This is it, the man you're fighting." Isn't just a basketball legend. He's someone who has spent decades using his success to lift other people up. Henri hung up the phone without saying goodbye. Frank's report was supposed to save him. Instead, it made him realize he was fighting someone much better than himself. Desperate to salvage his reputation, Henri decided to take matters into his own hands. He called Bobby Martinez, a gossip blogger who specialized in celebrity scandals. "Bobby, I have a story for you about Michael Jordan," Henri said. "I'm listening," Bobby replied, always hungry for clicks and views. Henri told Bobby about Jordan's gambling history, the arguments with teammates, and the times people had called him difficult to work with. He painted a picture of Jordan as an arrogant celebrity who thought he was above everyone else. "Are you sure about this?" Bobby asked. "Jordan's pretty popular in Chicago." "Trust me," Henri said. "People need to know the real Michael Jordan." That evening, Bobby published his story online. The headline read, "Jordan's Dark Side: Why the Basketball Legend Isn't the Hero You Think He Is." Within hours, the story was shared thousands of times on social media. People argued in comment sections about whether the stories were true. Some defended Michael, while others piled on with their own negative stories about meeting celebrities. For 48 hours, Chicago's social media was full of debates about Michael Jordan's character. Local news stations picked up the story. Radio shows discussed it endlessly. Isabella saw the attacks online and felt sick to her stomach. She texted Michael, "I'm so sorry. This is my fault for getting you involved." Michael's response came back quickly. "Never apologize for standing up for what's right. Truth has a way of rising to the surface." At Michael's house, Yvette was worried. She found her husband in his study, reading the negative articles with a calm expression. "This is exactly what they wanted," she said. "They're trying to destroy your reputation." Michael looked up from his computer. "Let them try. I've been judged my whole life. On basketball courts, in boardrooms, in restaurants. I learned long ago that the best response to criticism is to keep doing good work. But what if people believe these stories?" Michael smiled. "Then we'll give them a chance to see who I really am." Something unexpected began happening over the next few days. People who had never spoken publicly before started sharing their own stories about meeting Michael Jordan, but these weren't the negative stories Henri had hoped for. Maria Santos, a teacher from the South Side, posted on Facebook, "Bobby Martinez wants to talk about Jordan's dark side? Let me tell you about the Michael Jordan I know. When my classroom flooded 3 years ago, someone anonymously replaced all our books and supplies. I found out later it was Michael Jordan. He never asked for credit or publicity." The post was shared 800 times in 1 hour. Dr. James Wilson, a pediatric surgeon, wrote on Twitter, "I've worked with Michael Jordan on several charity projects. This man has quietly funded medical procedures for dozens of children whose families couldn't afford them. He doesn't do it for press. He does it because it's right." More and more stories emerged. A homeless shelter director talked about Jordan delivering meals every Thanksgiving. A youth basketball coach described how Jordan had secretly paid for equipment and uniforms for inner-city teams. The janitor at the United Center, Robert Thompson, gave an interview to the local news. "People want to know about Michael Jordan's character. I've worked in this building for 20 years. I've seen him stay late after games to help me move equipment." I've seen him remember the names of security guards and cleaning staff. That's the Michael Jordan I know. Isabella watched the tide of public opinion turn and felt proud to be associated with such a good man. But Henri Beaumont watched the same thing happen and felt his world falling apart. The negative stories about Jordan were being drowned out by hundreds of positive ones. People were sharing photos of Jordan at community events, visiting hospitals, and supporting local businesses. Meanwhile, Le Chateau Noir was falling apart. The health department had forced Henri to close the kitchen until all violations were fixed. The fire marshal had declared the building unsafe until electrical work was completed. The labor board was investigating complaints from former employees. Henri's savings were almost gone. His insurance company was refusing to pay for the repairs. His lawyer was asking for more money up front. On Thursday morning, Henri received the worst news yet. The building owner called to tell him that his lease was being terminated. "I'm sorry, Henri," the owner said, "but the negative publicity and the safety violations are too much. I can't have this building associated with discrimination and code violations." Henri sat alone in his empty restaurant, surrounded by broken equipment and unpaid bills. The place that had been his pride for 15 years was now his prison. He looked around at the fancy dining room that had once hosted Chicago's elite, the crystal chandeliers that were now covered in dust, the expensive furniture that would soon be repossessed. Henri realized that his attempt to destroy Michael Jordan had only destroyed himself. But across town, Michael was in his office with Isabella and Dr. Washington, finalizing plans for the Jordan Community Culinary Institute. The building had been purchased, the staff had been hired, the first class of students had been selected. "We start classes in 6 weeks," Michael told Isabella. "Are you ready?" Isabella nodded, feeling more confident than she had ever felt in her life. "I'm ready, Mr. Jordan. We're going to change everything." Michael looked out his window toward where Le Chateau Noir used to shine like a symbol of exclusivity. Now it sat dark and empty, a reminder that businesses built on discrimination cannot survive in a world moving toward fairness. "Henri made one crucial mistake," Michael said quietly. "He thought power came from keeping people out, but real power comes from bringing people in." The battle for Le Chateau Noir was over. Henri had lost not because Michael destroyed him, but because Henri had destroyed himself. Now the real work could begin. Henri Beaumont sat in his empty restaurant, staring at the eviction notice on his desk. Le Chateau Noir would be closed. Forever in 72 hours. His life's work was ending in shame and failure. But Henri wasn't ready to give up. In his desperation, he made a decision that would shock everyone in Chicago. He called a press conference. "Ladies and gentlemen of the media," Henri announced in a video he posted online, "I am challenging Michael Jordan to face me in person. If he is really the good man people think he is, then let him look me in the eye and tell me I'm wrong." Henri's voice shook with emotion as he continued, "I have lost everything because of what happened that night. My business, my reputation, my life savings. If Michael Jordan believes in fairness, then he should give me a chance to defend myself publicly." The challenge video went viral within hours. News stations picked it up immediately. Social media exploded with opinions about Henri's desperate move. Some people called it a publicity stunt. Others saw it as Henri's last attempt to save himself. Many thought it was the act of a broken man who had nothing left to lose. "This is clearly a trap," said Dr. Washington when she saw the video. She was in Michael's office with Isabella, planning the final details for the institute's opening. "Henri is trying to ambush you," Isabella agreed. "He'll probably have lawyers there, or try to make you look bad on camera." Michael watched Henri's video 3 times. He saw something in the man's eyes that others missed. It wasn't just anger or desperation. It was pain. The deep pain of someone who had lost everything and didn't understand how it happened. What if this isn't about winning or losing? Michael said quietly. What if it's about teaching? Yvette, who had been listening from across the room, walked over to her husband. Michael, you don't owe this man anything. He brought this on himself. That's exactly why I should meet with him, Michael replied, because someone needs to show him a different way forward. The media frenzy around Henri's challenge grew, bigger every day. Talk radio shows debated whether Michael should accept. Newspaper columnists wrote articles about pride, forgiveness, and public accountability. Michael's advisors were split. His business manager said it was too risky. His lawyer worried about legal implications. His publicist thought it could damage his reputation. But Isabella had a different perspective. Mr. Jordan, she said during one of their planning meetings, what if this meeting isn't just about you and Henri? What if it's about showing everyone else how to handle conflict with dignity? Michael looked at Isabella with new respect. In just a few weeks, she had grown from a nervous server into a thoughtful leader. Where would you hold the meeting? Dr. Washington asked. Somewhere neutral, Michael said. Somewhere that means something to this community. 3 days later, Michael announced his response. He would meet with Henri Beaumont in a public discussion, moderated by Dr. Washington. The location would be the community center in Michael's old neighborhood, the same place where he had first learned to play basketball as a child. The meeting would be live-streamed for anyone who wanted to watch. I believe in second chances, Michael said in his announcement video. I believe in honest conversation. And I believe that sometimes the best way to heal a community is to face our problems directly. The date was set for the following Friday at 7 o'clock in the evening. As news of the meeting spread, both men prepared in very different ways. Henri spent his time with lawyers, rehearsing accusations and deflections. His attorney, Marcus Klein, coached him on how to make Michael look arrogant and out of touch. Remember, Klein told Henri, you're the victim here. You're the small business owner being crushed by a powerful celebrity. Make people feel sorry. For you. Henri practiced his lines in front of a mirror. He memorized statistics about unemployment and business failures. He prepared to paint himself as David fighting Goliath. Meanwhile, Michael took a completely different approach. Instead of preparing attacks or defenses, he spent time at the Boys and Girls Club, talking to young people about fairness and respect. Mr. Jordan, asked a 16-year-old named Kevin, why are you meeting with that restaurant guy? Everyone knows he was wrong. Michael sat down next to Kevin on the basketball court. Because, Kevin, sometimes the person who hurts you the most is also the person who needs help the most. And sometimes, helping them helps everyone else too. I don't understand, said Keisha, the 11-year-old girl who had been attending the club's cooking classes. Why don't you just ignore him? Michael smiled at Keisha's honest question. Because ignoring problems doesn't make them go away. Facing them does. The night before the meeting, Michael received an unexpected visitor at his home. Elena Rodriguez, Isabella's grandmother, stood at his front door holding a container of homemade tamales. Mijo, Elena said, using the Spanish word for my son, I brought you something to eat before your big day tomorrow. Michael invited Elena into his kitchen, where they sat at his breakfast table sharing the warm tamales and talking about life. My granddaughter told me what you're doing tomorrow, Elena said. She's worried that this Henri man will try to hurt you. I'm not worried about Henri hurting me, Michael replied. I'm worried about him hurting himself, even more. Elena nodded with the wisdom of someone who had lived through many difficult times. Mijo, let me tell you something about revenge versus redemption. One destroys the heart of the person seeking it. The other heals the heart of everyone watching. She reached across the table and took Michael's hand. Tomorrow, you have a choice. You can destroy this man completely, or you can show him and everyone else what mercy looks like." "What would you do?" Michael asked. Elena smiled. "I would remember that hurt people, but healed people heal people." As Elena left that night, she gave Michael one final piece of advice. "Sometimes, mijo, the biggest victory is turning your enemy into your friend." Michael went to bed that night thinking about Elena's words. He had spent weeks planning how to build something positive from Henri's discrimination. But he hadn't thought about what Henri himself needed. Across town, Henri was alone in his empty apartment, drinking coffee and staring at his notes for the next day. He had lost his restaurant, his reputation, and most of his friends. Tomorrow's meeting was his last chance to salvage something from the wreckage of his life. But Henri had no idea what Michael was really planning. He expected an argument. He expected accusations and denials. He expected a fight. He wasn't prepared for the possibility of forgiveness. Friday morning arrived with gray clouds covering Chicago's skyline. The community center filled up early with local families, business leaders, reporters, and curious onlookers. The live stream started at 6 o'clock, giving people time to log on and share the link. Within the first 10 minutes, over 2 million people were watching from around the world. Dr. Washington introduced the format. Each man would have 15 minutes to speak, followed by an open discussion. The goal was honest conversation, not conflict. Henri arrived first, wearing his most expensive suit and carrying a briefcase full of prepared statements. He looked polished but nervous, like a man about to take the biggest gamble of his life. Michael arrived a few minutes later, dressed in simple jeans and a polo shirt, as if he were about to have a conversation with a neighbor. He carried no notes, no briefcase, no armor for battle. As the two men took their seats on the small stage, the tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Henri looked across at Michael, the man who had cost him everything. Michael looked back at Henri, the man who had reminded him why his work mattered. Neither of them knew that this meeting would change both of their lives forever. The cameras rolled, the audience held its breath, and the real conversation was about to begin. The community center was packed beyond capacity. Folding chairs filled every inch of floor space. People stood along the walls. Local families sat next to business leaders. Teenagers from the neighborhood mixed with reporters from major news stations. Dr. Margaret Washington stepped to the microphone at the front of the room. Her voice was calm and steady as she addressed both the live audience and the millions watching online. "Good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Margaret Washington, and I'll be moderating tonight's discussion between Henri Beaumont and Michael Jordan. Our goal is honest conversation, not confrontation. Each speaker will have 15 minutes to share their perspective, followed by open dialogue." She turned to look at both men sitting on the small stage. Henri sat stiffly in his expensive black suit, his hands gripping a folder of prepared notes. Michael appeared relaxed in his jeans and simple blue shirt, sitting forward slightly as if he were about to chat with a friend. "Mr. Beaumont," Dr. Washington said, "you requested this meeting. Please begin." Henri stood up and walked to the podium. His hands shook slightly as he opened his folder and pulled out his prepared speech. The community center fell completely silent. "Ladies and gentlemen," Henri began, his French accent thick with nervousness, "I am here tonight because I have been unfairly destroyed by a powerful man who used his fame and connections to ruin my life." Henri's voice grew stronger as he found his rhythm. 3 weeks ago, I made a business decision at my restaurant. Yes, I turned away Mr. Jordan's party. But this was not about discrimination. This was about maintaining the standards and atmosphere that my customers expected. A few people in the audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Henri continued reading from his prepared remarks. "Le Chateau Noir served Chicago's elite for 25 years. We had dress codes. We had reservation policies. We had standards that made us special. Mr. Jordan and his friends did not meet those standards that evening. Henry looked up from his notes and stared directly at Michael. But instead of accepting this simple business decision, Mr. Jordan used his wealth and influence to systematically destroy everything I worked my entire life to build. Henri's voice cracked with emotion. My restaurant is closed. My staff has been turned against me. City inspectors found violations that were never problems before. My reputation has been ruined by social media attacks organized by Mr. Jordan's supporters. The audience listened politely, but Henri could sense their skepticism. He was losing them. I came to America 40 years ago with nothing, Henri said, departing from his script. I worked in restaurant kitchens, cleaning dishes and mopping floors. I saved every penny to open my own place. Le Chateau Noir was my American dream. His voice broke completely. And now it's gone. All because I dared to say no to Michael Jordan. Henri walked back to his seat, his prepared speech only half finished. He sat down heavily, looking defeated and exhausted. The audience was polite but unmoved. Henry's words felt rehearsed and hollow. Even his lawyer sitting in the front row looked disappointed. Dr. Washington nodded. Thank you, Mr. Beaumont. Mr. Jordan, your response? Michael stood up, but instead of walking to the podium, he did something unexpected. He walked down into the audience and sat in an empty folding chair next to a 10-year-old girl named Keisha Williams. Keisha was the same girl from the Boys and Girls Club who dreamed of becoming a chef. Her mother, Sandra, worked 3 jobs to support their family. They had come tonight because they believed in Michael's message about fairness and opportunity. Hello, Keisha, Michael said softly, his voice picked up by the wireless microphone, clipped to his shirt. Hi, Mr. Jordan, Keisha whispered back, suddenly shy with all the cameras pointed at them. Michael looked around the room, making eye contact with people throughout the audience. When he spoke, his voice was conversational, as if he were talking to friends in his living room. Henri, Michael said, looking directly at the man who had challenged him. I want to tell you about the night you turned us away. But first, I want to tell you about this young lady sitting next to me. Michael put his hand gently on Keisha's shoulder. Keisha is 10 years old. She loves to cook with her grandmother every weekend. She practices making pancakes and scrambled eggs before school, and she has a dream. Michael smiled at Keisha, encouraging her to speak. Tell everyone your dream, Keisha. Keisha's voice was small but clear. I want to open a restaurant that welcomes everybody, no matter what they look like or how much money they have. The audience began to warm up. This wasn't what they expected from a confrontation between 2 adults. Michael continued, Keisha represents the future of hospitality. She understands something that Henri forgot. Restaurants aren't just about food. They're about bringing people together. They're about making everyone feel like they belong. He paused, letting his words sink in before addressing Henri directly. Henri, you said I used my wealth and influence to destroy you. But you're wrong about something important. I didn't destroy Le Chateau Noir. You did. Michael's voice remained gentle, but his words carried weight. Every time you turned away a family because of their skin color, you destroyed a little bit of your restaurant's soul. Every time, you made someone feel unwelcome. You built walls instead of bridges. Henri shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his prepared defenses crumbling. You didn't just refuse me a table that night, Michael continued. You refused my friends. You refused the idea that all people deserve respect. You refused to see the humanity in others. Michael stood up from his chair but remained in the audience. But here's what I learned from basketball, Henri. The best response to being underestimated is not anger. It's excellence. The crowd was completely absorbed now. Even the online viewers had stopped typing. Comments focused entirely on Michael's words. So yes, I used my connections after that night, but not to destroy you. I used them to build something better, to create opportunities for young people like Keisha who believe that hospitality should come from the heart, not from prejudice. Michael walked slowly toward the front of the room, his eyes never leaving Henry's face. 3 weeks ago, when you turned us away, I made you a promise. Do you remember what I whispered in your ear? Henry nodded slowly, his face pale. I told you, thank you for reminding me why I do what I do. Because, Henry, you didn't just insult me that night. You gave me a gift. You reminded me that there are still places in this world where people judge others by the color of their skin instead of the content of their character. Michael reached into his pocket and pulled out a folder of his own. But unlike Henri's prepared attack, Michael's folder contained something entirely different. So I decided to do something about it, Michael announced, his voice growing stronger. For the past 3 weeks, I've been working with Isabella Rodriguez, who quit your restaurant the night you turned us away, to create something new. Isabella stood up from her seat in the audience. She was no longer the nervous young server from that terrible night. She looked confident and professional in her business suit. Ladies and gentlemen, Michael said, his voice filling the community center with excitement, I want to introduce you to the Jordan Community Culinary Institute. The room erupted in surprised murmurs. This wasn't the confrontation anyone had expected. Michael opened his folder and held up architectural drawings and business plans. A place where young people like Keisha can learn not just how to cook, but how to run businesses that serve everyone, with dignity and respect. The audience began to understand that they weren't witnessing a fight. They were witnessing the birth of something transformative. But Michael wasn't finished. He had one more surprise that would change everything. The community center buzzed with excitement as people whispered to each other about the Culinary Institute. Online, the live stream had grown to over 5 million viewers worldwide. Comments flooded in from people amazed by Michael's response to discrimination. But Michael raised his hand for quiet. His expression grew more serious, and the room fell silent again. The Jordan Community Culinary Institute will train 50 students in our first class, Michael continued, addressing both Henri and the two audience. Young people aged 16 to 25, who want to learn that true service comes from the heart, not from prejudice. He walked closer to Henri, who sat frozen in his chair. Isabella will be the Institute's first director. We're partnering with local high schools to provide scholarships, job training, and business mentorship. Our first graduating class will open a restaurant right here in this neighborhood. Michael paused, looking around the room at faces filled with hope and excitement. A place where the only reservation you need is a hunger to be treated like family. The audience erupted in applause, but Michael gestured for them to listen. He wasn't finished. But there's something else, Michael said, his voice taking on a different tone. Something that will determine whether this institute succeeds or fails. Henri looked confused. The crowd leaned forward, sensing that the biggest moment was still coming. Henri, Michael said, turning to face the man who had started this entire journey. I have an offer for you. Henri's mouth fell open. This was the last thing he had expected. Your restaurant is failing, Michael continued, his voice gentle but direct. Your reputation is damaged. Your staff has quit. Your building is being taken away. You have 2 choices. Michael took a step closer to Henri. You can fight this battle until you lose everything you have left. You can spend your remaining money on lawyers and private investigators, trying to tear me down while you sink deeper into debt and bitterness. Henri's face went pale. How did Michael know about the private investigator? Or, Michael said, his voice softening, you can be part of the solution. The community center fell so quiet that people could hear their own heartbeats. The live stream audience stopped typing comments, hanging on every word. I'm offering you a job, Henry, Michael announced. Come work with us at the Jordan Community Culinary Institute. Help train our students in fine dining service. Teach them what you know about running a high-end establishment. Show them how to create excellence without excluding people. Gasps echoed throughout the room. This was beyond unexpected. It was revolutionary. Henri sat speechless, staring at Michael, as if he were speaking a foreign language. You know things our students need to learn, Michael continued. You understand classical French cooking techniques. You know how to manage kitchen operations. You know what it takes to create a fine dining experience. Michael's voice grew warmer. But most importantly, you can teach them from your mistakes as much as from your successes. You can show them what happens when a business forgets that. Hospitality is about serving all people, not just some people. Henry's lawyer, Marcus Klein, jumped up from his seat. Don't say anything, Henry, he called out. This is a trap. But Henry wasn't listening to his lawyer. He was staring at Michael Jordan, the man he had tried to humiliate, who was now offering him a lifeline when he was drowning. Why? Henry whispered, his voice barely audible through the microphone. Why? Would you help me after what I did to you? Michael walked over and sat in the empty chair next to Henri. Now they were eye to eye, man to man, with no podium or distance between them. Because, Henri, I learned something important from my mother when I was 8 years old. She taught me that hurt people, but she also taught me that healed people heal people. Michael's voice was so gentle that people in the back of the room had to strain to hear him. You didn't hurt me that night at your restaurant, Henri. You revealed that you were already hurting. Someone along the way made you feel like you had to choose between success and kindness. Someone taught you that power meant keeping others down instead of lifting them up. Tears began forming in Henry's eyes. My father lost his restaurant in France because he wasn't good enough for the critics. They said our food was too simple, our service too rough. I swore I would never be the one looking up at others again. So you became the one looking down, Michael said softly. I understand, but Henri, there's a third option. You can be the one helping others look forward. The emotion in the room was overwhelming. People were crying, not just for Henri's pain, but for the possibility of redemption they were witnessing. What would I have to do? Henri asked, his voice shaking. Apologize, Michael said simply. Not just to me, but to every person you ever made feel unwelcome. And then prove that apology through your actions. Henri looked around the room at all the faces watching him. Black faces, white faces, Latino faces, Asian faces. People of all ages and backgrounds, all waiting to see if he had the courage to change. Isabella stood up from her seat and walked to the front of the room. Mr. Beaumont, she said, her voice strong and clear, I worked for you for 2 years. I watched you turn away good families for bad reasons. But I also watched you create beautiful meals and train servers to provide excellent service. She paused, looking directly at Henri. If you're willing to learn, I'm willing to teach you what real hospitality looks like. If you're willing to change, I'm willing to give you a chance to help us build something better. The crowd waited in breathless silence. 5 million people around the world watched their screens, waiting to see what Henri would choose. Henri looked at Michael, then at Isabella, then at little Keisha, who was still sitting in the front row with dreams of opening an inclusive restaurant. Henri started, then stopped. His voice cracked with emotion he had kept buried for decades. I need to tell you all something, Henri said, standing up slowly. My father didn't just lose his restaurant because of critics. He lost it because we couldn't compete with the bigger establishments that looked down on us. They rejected us because we weren't fancy enough, rich enough, connected enough. Henri's voice grew stronger as he found the courage to continue. I swore that when I had my own place, I would never be the one looking up at others. I would be the one with power. He paused, struggling with emotions he had kept locked away for 40 years, but somewhere along the way, I became the person I once hated. I became the one looking down. I became the one making others feel small. Henri walked toward Michael, past the cameras, past his lawyer's frantic gestures, past his own pride and fear. Mr. Jordan, Henri said, his voice clear for the first time all evening, I don't deserve your offer. I don't deserve your kindness. I don't deserve a second chance. The room held its breath. But if you'll have me, Henri continued, I would like to help your students learn from my mistakes as much as my successes. I would like to show them that excellence in service means serving everyone, not just some. Henri extended his shaking hand toward Michael Jordan. I would like to try to become the person I should have been all along. Michael stood up and took Henri's hand in both of his own. The handshake lasted several seconds as the two men looked into each other's eyes. Then Michael pulled Henri into a firm embrace. The community center erupted in applause and tears. The online audience exploded with comments of amazement and hope. The image of Michael Jordan hugging Henri Beaumont, the basketball legend embracing the man who had discriminated against him, became one of the most shared photos of the year. But the most powerful moment wasn't captured by any camera. It was Henri whispering in Michael's ear, "Thank you for showing me what grace looks like." The immediate crisis was over. The confrontation had become reconciliation. But what happened next would determine whether this moment of transformation could create lasting change. The community center slowly began to empty as people filed out into the Chicago night, their conversations buzzing with excitement about what they had just witnessed. But Henri Beaumont remained seated on the stage, staring at his hands as if seeing them for the first time. His lawyer, Marcus Klein, approached with a furious expression. "Henri, what have you done? We had a strategy. We were going to make Jordan look like a bully." Henri looked up at Klein with tired eyes. "Marcus, I'm firing you." "You can't fire me. You still owe me $15,000. "Send me the bill," Henri said quietly. "I'll find a way to pay it, but I won't need your services anymore." Klein stormed out, muttering about ungrateful clients and wasted opportunities. Michael walked over to where Henri sat alone. "You don't have to decide tonight," he said gently. "Take some time to think about it." "No," Henri replied, his voice stronger than it had been all evening. "I've spent 40 years thinking about the wrong things. It's time to start thinking about the right ones." He stood up and faced Michael directly. "When do I start?" Isabella approached them with a warm smile. "Mr. Beaumont, the Institute doesn't open for 3 more weeks. That gives us time to plan your curriculum and get you settled." Henri nodded, then asked the question that had been weighing on his heart. "Isabella, can you ever forgive me for what I put you through? For all the times I made you watch discrimination happen and forced you to stay silent?" Isabella considered his words carefully. "Mr. Beaumont, forgiveness isn't something that happens once. It's something that happens every day through our actions. Ask me again in 6 months, when I see how you treat our students." Her honest answer hit Henri harder than any insult could have. He realized that earning forgiveness would require more than words. It would require a complete change in how he lived his life. Dr. Washington joined their small group. "Henri, I want you to understand something. I have files documenting discrimination complaints against Le Chateau Noir going back 2 years. Those families you turned away. They're real people with real hurt. Henri's face went pale. How many? 15. Formal complaints. Probably dozens more who never filed reports because they didn't think anyone would listen. Henri sat back down heavily. I want to apologize to them. All of them. Can you help me find them? Dr. Washington exchanged a look with Michael. That's a start, Henri. But apologies only matter if they're followed by changed behavior. Meanwhile, across the room, little Keisha was tugging on her mother's sleeve. Mama, can I talk to Mr. Henri? Sandra Williams looked concerned. Baby, I don't think that's a good idea right now. But Keisha was already walking toward the small group on the stage. Her 10-year-old courage amazed the adults who watched her approach the man who had caused so much pain. Mr. Henri? Keisha said softly. Henri looked down at the child and felt his heart break a little more. Yes, young lady? My mama says you used to be mean to people who looked like us. Henri knelt down to Keisha's eye level. That's true. I was very mean. And I'm very sorry. Keisha studied his face with the honest directness that only children possess. Are you going to be mean anymore? I'm going to try very hard not to be, Henri said, his voice thick with emotion. Good, Keisha said simply. Because when I open my restaurant, I want everyone to feel happy there. Even people who used to be mean but aren't mean anymore. Henri felt tears in his eyes. This child was offering him something his own lawyer couldn't. Genuine hope for redemption. Keisha, Henri said softly, would you like me to teach you how to make French pastries? Keisha's eyes lit up. Really? You would do that? If your mother says it's okay, and if Mr. Jordan thinks it's a good idea. Michael smiled. I think it's a perfect idea. As the evening wound down, Michael pulled Henri aside for a private conversation. Henri, I want you to understand what you're signing up for. This isn't going to be easy. Our students come from all backgrounds: Black, Latino, Asian, white, rich, poor. Some of them have faced discrimination their whole lives. Henri nodded. I understand. Some of them might not trust you at first. Some might be angry when they learn about your past. You'll have to earn their respect through your actions, not your words. I'm ready for that, Henri said. I need to learn as much as they do. Michael studied Henri's face, looking for any sign of doubt or insincerity. What he saw was a broken man genuinely seeking to rebuild himself into something better. There's one more thing, Michael said. The Institute isn't just about cooking. We're teaching these young people to become leaders in their communities. They'll go on to open restaurants, start businesses, hire employees. The way you treat them will affect how they treat others for the rest of their lives. Henri felt the weight of that responsibility. Mr. Jordan, why are you taking such a risk? On me? What if I disappoint you? Michael was quiet for a long moment. Henri, do you know what my biggest regret is from my basketball career? Henri shook his head. I regret the teammates I didn't help become better. I was so focused on winning that I sometimes forgot that the real victory was lifting everyone up together. Michael looked around the community center, where volunteers were cleaning up chairs and taking down equipment. I don't want to make that mistake again. You're not my enemy, Henri. You're someone who needs help becoming the person you were meant to be. And helping you helps everyone else, too. 3 days later, Henri stood outside his empty restaurant for the last time. Le Chateau Noir was officially closed. The health department had posted notices on the doors. The building owner had already begun looking for new tenants. Henri had lost everything he thought mattered. But as he walked away from the restaurant that had defined his life for 15 years, He felt something unexpected: relief. He was finally free from the prison of his own prejudices. That same afternoon, Henri had his first meeting at the Jordan Community Culinary Institute. The building was still under construction, but Isabella gave him a tour of what would become the kitchens, classrooms, and dining areas. "This will be your teaching kitchen," Isabella said, showing him a beautiful space with modern equipment and large windows overlooking the neighborhood. Henri looked around the room where he would spend his days teaching young people. "Isabella, may I ask you something personal?" "Of course." "What made you believe I could change? After everything you saw me do, why did you support Mr. Jordan's offer?" Isabella leaned against one of the new counters. "Mr. Beaumont, my grandmother, came to this country with nothing. She faced discrimination every day for 50 years, but she taught me something important. People aren't born hateful. They learn to hate because they're afraid or hurt or angry." She looked directly at Henri. "Last night I saw a hurt man, not a hateful one. Hurt can be healed. Hate is much harder to fix." Henri felt gratitude wash over him. "I won't let you down, Isabella. I won't let any of them down." "I know you won't," Isabella said with a smile, "because if you do, I'll fire you myself." They both laughed, and Henri realized it was the first time he had genuinely laughed in months. Outside, Chicago was changing one conversation at a time, one second chance at a time, one choice at a time. The question was no longer whether Henri could change. The question was whether the change would last long enough to matter. The smell of fresh bread and simmering sauces filled the air at the Jordan Community Culinary Institute. Isabella Rodriguez walked through the main kitchen, watching 30 young students practice their knife skills under the careful guidance of their instructors. At one station, Henri Beaumont demonstrated proper julienne technique to a group of teenagers. His once pristine appearance had changed over the months. His expensive suits had been replaced with simple chef's coats. His slicked-back hair was now covered by a practical white hat. Most importantly, his cold expression had been replaced by genuine warmth. "Remember, Marcus," Henri said to a 17-year-old student from the South Side, "the knife should rock forward, not chop down, like this." Marcus Washington was Dr. Margaret Washington's nephew. When his aunt first told him he would be learning from Henri Beaumont, Marcus had been angry. He knew about Henri's past discrimination, but 6 months of working together had changed both of their perspectives. "Mr. Henri," Marcus said, concentrating on his cutting technique, "my vegetables still don't look as good as yours." Henri smiled patiently. "Marcus, I have been cutting vegetables for 30 years. You have been cutting them for 3 months. But your improvement is remarkable. Soon you will be teaching this technique to someone else." At another station, Keisha Williams, now 11 years old, was carefully folding croissant dough under Henri's supervision. True to his promise, Henri had been teaching her French pastry techniques every Saturday morning. "Is this right, Mr. Henri?" Keisha asked, showing him her work. Henri examined the delicate layers of butter and dough. "Perfect, ma petite chef. Your grandmother would be proud." Keisha beamed with pride. Over the past 6 months, she had become Henri's unofficial assistant, helping him set up equipment and organize ingredients. Their friendship had become a symbol of the Institute's mission, bringing people together across age, race, and background. Isabella approached their station with a warm smile. Henri had kept every promise he made that night at the community center. He arrived early every morning, stayed late every evening, and treated every student with respect and kindness. "Henri," Isabella said, "there's someone here to see you." Henri looked puzzled. "Who is it?" "Mrs. Chen. She was one of the families turned away from Le Chateau Noir last year." Henri's face went pale. Over the past months, He had been systematically apologizing to everyone Dr. Washington had identified as victims of his discrimination. Some meetings had gone well, others had been painful and difficult. But he faced each one with courage and humility. "Is she angry?" Henri asked quietly. "I don't think so," Isabella replied. "She asked specifically to speak with you." Henri removed his chef's hat and walked to the institute's front lobby. Mrs. Chen was waiting with her teenage daughter, Amy. "Mrs. Chen," Henri said, approaching carefully, "thank you for coming." Mrs. Chen studied Henri's face. "Mr. Beaumont, when Dr. Washington told me you wanted to apologize, I wasn't sure I wanted to hear it. My family was celebrating Amy's acceptance to Northwestern University that night. You made us feel unwelcome on one of the happiest days of our lives." Henri felt the familiar ache of shame. "Mrs. Chen, there is no excuse for what I did. I was wrong, and I hurt your family when I should have been celebrating with you." Amy Chen stepped forward. "Mr. Beaumont, my mom and I have been following the news about this institute. We wanted to see for ourselves if you had really changed." "And what do you think?" Henri asked honestly. Mrs. Chen looked around the bustling institute. Students of all backgrounds worked together, laughed together, learned together. The energy was positive and inclusive. Everything Le Chateau Noir had never been. "I think," Mrs. Chen said slowly, "that this place would have welcomed my family that night." Henri nodded. "Mrs. Chen, I cannot change what I did to you, but I promise that because of what I learned from my mistakes, no student who graduates from here will ever make another family feel the way I made yours feel." Amy Chen reached into her backpack and pulled out an envelope. "Mr. Beaumont, I'm starting my sophomore year at Northwestern next month. I'm majoring in business with a focus on hospitality management. I'd like to volunteer here on weekends if you'll have me." Henri was speechless. The daughter of a family he had discriminated against wanted to volunteer at his new workplace. "Amy," Henri said, his voice thick with emotion, "it would be an honor to have you here." Meanwhile, in the main dining room, Michael Jordan was having lunch with several community leaders who had come to see the Institute in action. The restaurant, called Common Ground, was operated entirely by the Institute's students under professional supervision. "Michael," said Chef Roberto Martinez, one of the Institute's supporters, "this place is extraordinary. The food quality rivals any restaurant in Chicago, but the atmosphere is something completely different." Dr. Sarah Kim, the pediatric surgeon who provided medical services for the students, nodded in agreement. "I've eaten at the finest restaurants in the world, but I've never been to a place where the service came so clearly from the heart." Their server, a 19-year-old named David Kim, no relation to Dr. Kim, approached their table with genuine enthusiasm. "How was everything today, Dr. Kim?" "Outstanding, David. The salmon was perfectly prepared." David beamed with pride. "That was actually cooked by one of our newest students, Keisha. She's only 11, but Mr. Henry says she has natural talent." Michael smiled. "And how is Mr. Henry as an instructor?" David's expression grew serious. "Mr. Jordan, when I first heard that Henri Beaumont was going to teach here, I was angry. My family is Korean, and we've faced discrimination in restaurants before. I didn't trust him." "What changed your mind?" Dr. Kim asked. "Actions," David said simply. "Mr. Henry doesn't just talk about treating people equally. He shows us every day through how he works with us. He remembers everyone's name. He celebrates our successes. He helps us when we struggle. He's not the same person who ran Le Chateau Noir." After David left their table, Michael felt a deep satisfaction. The Institute was succeeding beyond his original dreams. But more importantly, it was proving that people could change when given the right opportunity and support. That evening, Henri stayed late to prepare for the next day's classes. Isabella found him in the main kitchen, organizing ingredients for a lesson on sauce making. "Henri, you know you don't have to work this hard," Isabella said. "You've already proven yourself." Henri looked up from his prep work. "Isabella, 6 months ago I was a bitter man running an empty restaurant. Today I helped 30 young people learn skills that will change their lives. This isn't work for me anymore. This is joy." Isabella smiled. "The students love you, you know. They call you Papa Henry when you're not listening." Henri felt tears in his eyes. "I never had children of my own. I always thought I was too busy building my career. But these students, they have given me something I didn't know I was missing." As they cleaned up the kitchen together, Isabella reflected on how much had changed since that terrible night at Le Chateau Noir. Henri had transformed from an antagonist into a beloved mentor. The Institute had grown from an idea into a thriving center of learning and community. But the most important change was harder to measure. It was the way students from different backgrounds worked together naturally. It was the respect they showed for each other and their instructors. It was the pride they took in serving others with dignity. The next morning brought unexpected news. A food critic from the Chicago Tribune had eaten at Common Ground the previous week without anyone knowing. Her review was published on the front page of the food section. "Common Ground isn't just a restaurant," the critic wrote. "It's a masterclass in what hospitality should be. The food is exceptional, but what makes this place special is the genuine care with which every guest is treated. This is what happens when a dining establishment truly believes that every customer deserves respect and excellent service." The review concluded, "In a city full of exclusive restaurants that make diners feel privileged to eat there, Common Ground makes every guest feel valued. This is the future of Chicago dining." Henri read the review 3 times, hardly believing that his work was being praised in the same newspaper that had once covered his discrimination scandal. Michael called Henri into his office that afternoon. "Congratulations on the review, Henri. You've come a long way." "We've all come a long way," Henri replied. "Mr. Jordan, I need to tell you something. 6 months ago, you saved my life. Not just my career or my reputation, but my actual life. I was becoming a person I hated, and I didn't know how to stop." Michael shook his head. "Henri, I didn't save you. You saved yourself by choosing to change. But you gave me the opportunity to choose differently." Michael smiled. "And you took that opportunity and turned it into something beautiful." As Henri left the office, he passed the main dining room where students were setting up for the evening service. The sight still amazed him. Young people of every background working together with professionalism and joy. Keisha waved at him from across the room, where she was helping fold napkins. "Mr. Henri, will you teach me chocolate soufflé tomorrow?" "Of course, ma petite chef," Henri called back. "But first, you must master the hollandaise sauce." Henri had found something at the Institute that Le Chateau Noir had never given him. A sense of purpose that went beyond profit or prestige. He was helping to shape the next generation of hospitality leaders, teaching them that true success meant serving others with dignity and respect. The question was no longer whether Henri's change would last. After 6 months of consistent action and genuine transformation, it was clear that the change was permanent. The real question now was how far that change would spread. 1 year after the restaurant incident that changed everything, Michael Jordan stood at the podium of the Chicago Convention Center. The room was packed with reporters, business leaders, and community organizers from across the country. Television cameras from major networks focused on his every word. "Ladies and gentlemen," Michael began, "exactly 1 year ago today, someone asked me to leave their restaurant because of the color of my skin. Today, I want to announce that we're not just staying in Chicago, we're expanding across America." The audience erupted in applause, but Michael gestured for quiet. He had much more to share. The Jordan Community Culinary Institute is partnering with culinary schools and community organizations in 10 cities across the United States. We're creating a network of training centers focused on inclusive hospitality, places where young people can learn that true service comes from the heart, not from prejudice. Behind Michael, a large screen displayed a map of the United States with bright dots marking the new institute locations: Atlanta, Detroit, Los Angeles, Phoenix, Denver, Houston, Philadelphia, Boston, Seattle, and Miami. Isabella Rodriguez, now 23 and wearing a professional business suit, stepped to the microphone. In just 1 year, she had transformed from a nervous server into a confident educational leader. Each new institute will be run by graduates of our Chicago program, Isabella announced. Young people who learned here that success means lifting others up, not putting them down. The crowd applauded as Isabella introduced the 10 graduates who would be moving to different cities to start new programs. Each young person represented a different background and story, but all shared the same commitment to inclusive hospitality. Marcus Washington, Dr. Margaret Washington's nephew, stepped forward as the future director of the Atlanta Institute. 18 months ago, I was just another teenager from the South Side, with big dreams but no clear path. The Chicago Institute gave me skills, confidence, and most importantly, a mission to serve others with dignity. Amy Chen, the daughter of the family Henry had discriminated against, was announced as the director of the Los Angeles program. Sometimes the worst experiences in our lives lead to the best opportunities to make a difference, she said. I'm excited to teach other young people that hospitality is about making everyone feel welcome. But the biggest surprise came when Henri Beaumont took the stage. The man who had once been the symbol of discrimination now stood before a national audience as a teacher and mentor. "My name is Henri Beaumont," he said, his French accent softer now, warmed by months of working with young people. 1 year ago, I was the owner of an exclusive restaurant that practiced discrimination. Today, I am proud to announce that I will be traveling between all 10 new institutes, teaching classical culinary techniques and sharing the lessons I learned from my mistakes. Henri paused, looking out at the diverse audience. I want every young chef who graduates from these programs to understand something I wish I had learned 40 years ago. True excellence in hospitality means serving everyone with respect, regardless of what they look like or where they come from. The applause was thunderous. Many people in the audience were crying, moved by Henri's complete transformation. Dr. Margaret Washington approached the microphone next. The legal case against Le Chateau Noir has been closed, she announced. But more importantly, we've opened something much bigger, a movement that proves discrimination has no place in American business. She pulled out a thick folder. I have received calls from restaurant owners, hotel managers, and business leaders in all 50 states who want to partner with the Jordan Institute Network. They want training for their staff on inclusive service. They want certification that their businesses welcome everyone. Michael returned to the podium for the final announcement. But our expansion isn't just about restaurants and hotels. We're launching the Second Chance Foundation, a program that will identify young people who have faced discrimination, poverty, or other barriers to success. Yvette Jordan joined her husband on stage, carrying an elegant folder. Every year, we will provide 100 young people with education, mentorship, and business startup funds. But more than that, we'll connect them with a network of support that extends far beyond any single program. Michael's voice grew emotional as he continued. Henri taught me something important that night at his restaurant, though he didn't mean to. He reminded me that change doesn't happen when we defeat our opponents. It happens when we transform them into allies. The crowd rose to their feet as Dr. Washington presented the legal documents establishing the Second Chance Foundation with an initial endowment of $50 million from Michael and Yvette Jordan, matched by contributions from business leaders who had been inspired by the story. The foundation has already received additional pledges totaling another $75 million, Dr. Washington announced. This includes major contributions from restaurant chains, hotel groups, and individual business owners who believe in the power of second chances. But the most emotional moment came when 12-year-old Keisha Williams took the microphone. She was no longer the shy child from the community center. Months of working with Henri and other professional chefs had given her confidence and skills far beyond her years. "Hi, everyone," Keisha said, her voice clear and strong. "My name is Keisha Williams, and I'm going to tell you about my restaurant." The audience smiled as Keisha described her business plan. "I'm opening the first restaurant that's run by kids for families. We'll serve food that makes people happy. And everyone will be welcome. Mr. Henry is helping me design the kitchen, and Mr. Jordan is helping me write the business plan." Keisha's enthusiasm was infectious. "When people try to say we're too young or not good enough, we'll prove them wrong by being amazing. Because that's what Mr. Jordan taught me. When someone tries to make you feel small, you don't get mad. You get better." The crowd was laughing and applauding, but Keisha had one more important thing to say. "And when I open my restaurant, the first customers will be Mr. Henry and Mr. Jordan, because they taught me that the best way to fight meanness is with kindness." Michael knelt down to Keisha's level and whispered something in her ear that made her giggle. Then he stood and addressed the audience one final time. "Keisha represents the future we're building together," Michael said. "A future where young people learn that success isn't about keeping others out. It's about bringing everyone in." As the press conference ended, reporters surrounded the speakers with questions about timelines, funding, and implementation details. But the real story was happening in quieter conversations around the room. Business owners were exchanging contact information with institute graduates. Community leaders were discussing partnerships with local schools. Young people were asking about application processes for the new programs. The ripple effect that began with one night of discrimination was now spreading across the entire country. Later that evening, the original team gathered at Common Ground Restaurant for a private celebration. Michael, Yvette, Isabella, Henri, Dr. Washington, and little Keisha sat around a large table, sharing a meal prepared by the Institute's students. "Can you believe how far we've come?" Isabella asked, looking around the bustling restaurant that had become a symbol of inclusive hospitality. Henri raised his water glass. "To second chances," he said simply. "To transformation," added Dr. Washington. "To proving people wrong by being excellent," said Keisha, making everyone laugh. Michael raised his glass last. "To remembering that our greatest victories come, not from defeating our enemies, but from helping them become our friends." As they clinked glasses, none of them could have imagined that their story would inspire hundreds of similar programs across the country. Restaurant chains began implementing inclusivity training. Business schools added courses on ethical hospitality. Young entrepreneurs opened establishments specifically designed to welcome everyone. The movement that started with rejection had become a celebration of acceptance. The pain of discrimination had been transformed into the joy of inclusion. But there was still one final surprise that would ensure the legacy lasted for generations to come. As the celebration dinner at Common Ground began to wind down, Michael, Jordan stood up and tapped his water glass with his fork. The gentle chiming sound drew everyone's attention to him. "Before we end this incredible evening," Michael said, "there's something else I need to share with all of you. Something I've been working on quietly for the past 6 months." Isabella looked puzzled. "Mr. Jordan, I thought we had announced everything today." Michael smiled mysteriously. "Not quite everything." Yvette Jordan stepped forward, carrying the same elegant manila folder she had held during the press conference. But this time, she opened it and pulled out different documents. 2 months ago, Michael began, I received a phone call that changed how I think about legacy. It was from Dr. Amanda Rivera, the president of Roosevelt University here in Chicago. Dr. Washington leaned forward with interest. What did she want? She wanted to partner with us on something that has never been tried before in American education, Michael continued. A 4-year college degree program in inclusive hospitality management. The table fell silent as everyone processed what Michael was saying. Starting next fall, Yvette announced, Roosevelt University will offer the first bachelor's degree program, specifically focused on teaching young people how to run businesses that serve everyone with dignity and respect. Isabella's eyes went wide. A whole college program? Michael nodded. Students will spend 2 years at Roosevelt learning business fundamentals, then 2 years at our institutes getting hands-on experience in kitchens, dining rooms, and management offices. When they graduate, they'll be certified in both business, management, and inclusive hospitality practices. Henri sat back in his chair, amazed. This means our work will continue long after we're gone. Exactly, Michael said. But there's more. He pulled out another set of documents. The university has also agreed to establish the Jordan Beaumont Center for Hospitality Ethics. Henri's mouth dropped open. You want to put my name on a university center? Henri, Michael said gently, your transformation from exclusion to inclusion is the heart of everything we're teaching. Future students need to learn not just what to do, but what not to do. Your story, your mistakes, and your redemption will be taught in classrooms for decades to come. Tears began forming in Henri's eyes. A year ago, his name had been associated with discrimination and failure. Now it would be forever linked with education and positive change. Dr. Washington cleared her throat. There's something I need to tell all of you as well. Everyone turned to look at her. The American Bar Association has asked me to create a legal clinic at the university, she said. Students will learn how to fight discrimination cases while providing free legal services to families who face what you faced, Michael. Isabella clapped her hands together. This is incredible. We're not just opening restaurants. We're changing how people think about hospitality and fairness. But wait, Keisha said, raising her small hand like she was in school. What about my restaurant? Can I still open it even with all these big college programs? Michael laughed and knelt down next to Keisha's chair. Keisha, your restaurant is the most important part of this whole story. He pulled out one final document. This is a business license application for Keisha's Kitchen to be located right here in this neighborhood, the Jordan Community Culinary Institute will provide all the startup funding, and Henri will be your head chef until you're old enough to take over completely. Keisha jumped up from her chair and hugged Michael so tightly that he almost fell over. Really? A real restaurant? With my name on it? A real restaurant, Michael confirmed. And when you turn 18, you'll be the youngest restaurant owner in Chicago history. Henri wiped tears from his eyes. Keisha, it will be my honor to help you create a place where every person feels welcome. As the evening continued, the conversation turned to practical details about the university program, the legal clinic, and Keisha's restaurant. But underlying all the planning was a sense of amazement at how far they had all come. Isabella reflected on the journey from that terrible night at Le Chateau Noir to this moment of celebration and hope. Mr. Jordan, she said, when you first offered to help me, I thought it was just about my grandmother's medical bills and maybe a small restaurant. I never imagined anything like this. Michael smiled. Isabella, do you remember what I told you that first night in the parking lot? You said good things come to people who stand up for what's right. And do you believe that now? Isabella looked around the table at Henri, who had become like a grandfather to her, at Dr. Washington, who had become a mentor and friend, at little Keisha, who reminded them all why their work mattered, at the Jordans, who had turned their pain into purpose. "I believe it more than ever," Isabella said. The next morning brought news that none of them had expected. Tommy Rodriguez, the young man who had parked Michael's car the night of the discrimination incident, appeared on the local morning television show. "I want people to know what really happened that night," Tommy told the interviewer. "I was working outside Le Chateau Noir when Mr. Jordan and his friends were turned away. I saw how they were treated, but I also saw how Mr. Jordan responded." Tommy held up an envelope that was worn from being carried in his wallet. "Mr. Jordan gave me $200 that night and told me to keep working hard on my education. That money helped me finish my last semester of community college." The interviewer leaned forward with interest. "What happened after you graduated?" "Mr. Jordan kept his promise," Tommy said, his voice emotional. "He helped me get a scholarship to finish my business degree at Roosevelt University. Next month, I start my new job as a manager trainee at the Jordan Community Culinary Institute." Tommy looked directly into the camera. "People want to know what kind of man Michael Jordan really is. He's the kind of man who remembers a parking attendant's dreams and helps make them come true." The television interview was shared thousands of times on social media, but it also sparked something unexpected. Other people began sharing their own stories of quiet kindness they had received from Michael Jordan over the years. A single mother posted about anonymous grocery payments during a difficult Christmas. A veteran shared how Michael had stopped to help change his flat tire and ended up paying for new tires. A teacher described school supplies that appeared mysteriously after her classroom was vandalized. Henri watched these stories emerge from his small apartment and felt overwhelmed by the goodness he was witnessing. He realized that his discrimination hadn't just hurt one family that night, it had attacked someone who spent his life helping others. That afternoon, Henri called Michael's office. "Mr. Jordan?" Henri said when Michael answered the phone. "I need to tell you something that I should have said a year ago." "What's that, Henri?" "I need to apologize not just for discriminating against you, but for discriminating against all the people you could have helped with the time and energy you had to spend dealing with my prejudice." Michael was quiet for a long moment. "Henri, that's very thoughtful of you. But you know what? Dealing with your discrimination led to all of this. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us create opportunities for the best things we'll ever do." "Do you really believe that?" "I do," Michael said. "Henri, your discrimination forced me to think bigger than I ever had before. It made me realize that individual success isn't enough. We have to create systems that help everyone succeed." 6 months later, Keisha's Kitchen held its grand opening. The small restaurant was packed with families from the neighborhood, business leaders from downtown, and reporters from around the country. 12-year-old Keisha Williams, wearing a chef's hat that was slightly too big for her head, stood behind the kitchen counter directing a team of teenage cooks with the confidence of someone much older. Henri Beaumont, now officially known as Chef Henri by everyone in the neighborhood, worked beside Keisha as her mentor and sous chef. His transformation was complete, from the cold maitre d' of an exclusive restaurant to the warm heart of an inclusive kitchen. "Order up," Keisha called out, sliding a plate of her signature mac and cheese across the pass. "Table 7, the family with the baby." The first customers that day were Michael and Yvette Jordan, just as Keisha had promised at the press conference. They sat at table 1, sharing a meal cooked by a 12-year-old chef who had learned that the best service comes from genuine care. "This mac and cheese is incredible," Yvette told Keisha when she came out to greet them. "What's your secret?" Keisha grinned. "Chef Henri taught me that the secret ingredient is always love. and making sure everyone feels welcome here. At table 2 sat Henri's first guests, Mrs. Chen and her daughter Amy, the family he had discriminated against 2 years. Earlier, they had driven from California specifically to eat at Keisha's kitchen and to see how far Henri had come. "Mr. Beaumont," Mrs. Chen said when Henri approached their table, "my daughter and I wanted to tell you how proud we are of the man you've become." Henri felt tears in his eyes. "Mrs. Chen, your forgiveness gave me the courage to keep changing. Thank you for believing that people can become better than they were." Throughout the day, customers filled every table. Families celebrating birthdays, business people having lunch meetings, teenagers on dates, elderly couples sharing quiet dinners. Every person was served with the same level of care and respect. Isabella Rodriguez, now 24, and the director of education for all 10 Jordan Institutes, watched the opening from a corner table. She thought about her grandmother Elena, who had passed away peacefully 6 months earlier, knowing that her granddaughter was helping to change the world. Elena's last words to Isabella had been, "Mija, you turned your pain into purpose. That's what angels do." As the sun set over Chicago, Michael Jordan stood outside Keisha's kitchen, looking through the windows at the diverse crowd of people sharing meals and conversation. The restaurant was everything he had dreamed of when Henri Beaumont first turned him away. Dr. Washington approached and stood beside him. "Quite a journey from that night at Le Chateau Noir," she said. "The best journeys always start with the worst moments," Michael replied. "Henri's discrimination forced us to build something better than anything that existed before." Inside the restaurant, Henri was teaching Keisha how to prepare chocolate soufflé for tomorrow's dessert menu. The 11-year-old listened intently, asking questions about technique and timing. "Chef Henri," Keisha said as they worked, "do you think the people who used to be mean to you would be proud of what we built?" Henri considered the question carefully. "Keisha, I think they would be amazed. But more importantly, I think they would finally understand that success isn't about keeping people out. It's about bringing everyone in." As the restaurant closed that night, Keisha made an announcement to her staff. "Tomorrow, we're going to be even better than today. Because that's what we do here. We keep getting better at making everyone feel like family." The story that began with a refused reservation had become a testament to the power of turning obstacles into opportunities and enemies into allies. Henri Beaumont's discrimination had sparked a movement that would change hospitality industry standards across America. Michael Jordan, the basketball legend who could have chosen revenge over reconciliation, had instead chosen to build bridges. His response to hatred had been hope. His answer to exclusion had been inclusion. And in a small restaurant in Chicago, a 12-year-old chef was serving meals with love to anyone who walked through her doors, proving that the future of hospitality was in good hands. The last customer of the night was an elderly man who had been homeless for several months. Keisha served him the same careful attention she had given Michael Jordan that morning. "Thank you for making me feel welcome," the man said as he finished his free meal. "Thank you for trusting us with your evening," Keisha replied, already sounding like the business leader she would become. The circle was complete. Discrimination had been transformed into inclusion. Pain had been turned into purpose. And a little girl's dream of making everyone feel welcome had become a reality that would inspire generations to come. And that's how Michael Jordan turned one night of discrimination into a movement that changed thousands of lives, from a refused table to culinary institutes across America, from Henri's hatred to his redemption, from little Keisha's dream to her own restaurant. Sometimes the worst moments in our lives become the doorway to our greatest victories. Michael could have chosen revenge, but he chose to build something beautiful instead. Where are you listening from right now? Drop your city or country in the comments below. I love seeing our amazing community from all around the world. If this story of turning pain into purpose touched your heart, please hit that like button to help spread kindness to more people who need to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you never miss stories that remind us all that good can triumph over hate. Click on the video appearing on your screen right now for another incredible true story that will restore your faith in humanity. Remember, when someone tries to make you feel small, don't get mad. Get better and help. Others get better too. Until next time, keep spreading kindness.